Welcome. This is Asha with Birth of Your Life, and I wanted to welcome you to this training series on mastering sales in any economy. Now, sales is probably the dirty little word in business, but I really want to debunk that in this video series and really three basic things that I'd like to accomplish. One is for you to become aware of what's stopping you from achieving your financial and sales goals as you're sharing your service, your product, or even yourself as an employee. And so what are those things that are stopping you and that are obstacles in your life in order to have those successful transactions for your business? The second piece is really coming up with systematized process for you to implement that is authentic, that is honest, and that is really based on being of service. And the third piece is really engaging in business from a model of doing good for others and ourselves. So this very inclusive, and also so it's really looking at our internal resources and external resources, i.e. money or the service that we provide. So those are the three basic things: the obstacles, how we engage in a way that is authentic, and having the kind of results that is prosperous for everyone. So before we go into the first piece, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. So even though my background is as a scientist, as a molecular biologist, that really gives me more, I'm very logical in the way that I approach business, but really I spent about 95% of my career in sales and business development. What this really means is that basically I've made millions for other people, and in the past 4 years what I have done is taken a $50,000 a year company and transformed it into a $250,000 business model and way of living. And so what I want to do here is teach you how I've done that, how I've taken the knowledge and wisdom from my sales and business development career and transferred it to a completely different market. And I think that we can transfer the same set of knowledge, the same kind of process that I'm going to take you through for any kind of business, any kind of service, any kind of product, or even for yourself as someone who is seeking employment. I think that these principles really will apply to wherever it is that you are in the selling and buying in your life. So what I want to talk about today is 3 models of selling that really influence who we are as a buyer and as a seller. Now, the first one is the used car salesman. So we all have a visceral reaction, right, to what that means for us, what the standard is that we think of it. Whether it's true or not, we all have a reaction to this model of selling. The second one is the solicitor, or the door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesperson. And that's one of almost like you're being intrusive in somebody's space. The third model, which is actually becoming a very popular model of business these days, is the Tupperware party, where you gather together. Usually there's a host who gets a little bit of a kickback from hosting the party. There's a salesperson, everyone goes. There's less pressure in that environment, but everyone knows that you're really there to buy, and kind of creating community around the purchasing experience. So let's talk about the first one, the car salesman. Now, this is a model where we go into it with distrust. We don't trust this person. We feel that they may want to manipulate us, may want to control us, and really we're walking into their space. We're walking into their dealership, and they're ready to pounce on us. Now, this may or may not be the true situation that's happening in these scenarios, but it's what we as a collective or as individuals really feel about that experience. I mean, this is, you say used car salesman, everybody automatically has an idea of what that is. So that experience of not really trusting that person makes it very uncomfortable for a buyer to have a fun and enjoyable experience in buying a used or new car. So something that's supposed to be fun and exciting really becomes something that maybe we hesitate to do, or we kind of bring all our resources to the table. And then we also have the sense of these tactics that that have been used in these kind of transactions where they're very outdated tactics, and it's almost like they won't let you leave until you have some kind of purchase agreement in place. So that's one model, and your experience of that model really affects who you are as the person that's selling your service, your product, or yourself in an interview, let's just say. So the second model is one of soliciting. So in this scenario, it's really uncomfortable for everybody. I mean, I don't know anyone who does any form of soliciting that doesn't feel uncomfortable about having to interrupt someone while they're doing their thing. So from that seller's perspective, you have a goal or an intention at hand to share the information of your product or service, and the person who you're selling to doesn't really have that permission from you to come into their space. So you're walking into somebody else's space, and the person who is being solicited has an uncomfortable reaction because they're in their groove and someone is interrupting them, and they can go in two directions. One, they can just listen to their spiel and take the flyer with information, or two, they can say they can basically reject the seller, right, and say, I'm not interested, go home. So that's the second model. The third model, which is a more inclusive and community-based type of transaction, is this Tupperware model, or sometimes maybe a multi-level marketing, where you're really involving a whole community to have a collective and individual goals, sales goals achieved. And although this sounds like very feminine in nature and very inclusive and sort of team building, I know that many of us have, again, a visceral reaction to this when we know somebody's selling, some kind of multivitamins, and then they give us a sample and you can only buy it through them. We all have a reaction to this. And so what I want you today to get clear on is these three levels, or these three ways in which we are sold to, and what our reaction as a buyer or as a potential buyer is to each one of those. So take the first one, where we're walking into their space. What is our reaction as a buyer? Now the second one, where someone is coming into our space, what is our reaction as a buyer? And what is our reaction and our experience as a buyer in this sort of community party, or even virtual building of a team? What is our experience as a buyer of these kinds of products? So that's the first thing. The second thing is taking a look at how does this affect the way you sell your business. So how does your selling techniques or your selling model, how is it reflected on these three different models? So for instance, if you have a service, if you are a photographer, or if you provide some kind of energy healing or coaching, how do you engage in that situation where people come to you? Maybe it's at a trade show, people come to your space, and so how do you engage with them, and what's the experience that you're giving somebody else? The second scenario is when you solicit, and it can be soliciting even if you're, on an elevator and somebody mentions they want coaching, and so how do you approach that? They haven't necessarily directly asked you, but it is a soliciting situation. And then more of the community-based building, where it could be that you have a network group, and so how do you engage as a seller in that situation? So I want you to take a look at all those three scenarios and what your experience is as a buyer in all those three experiences, and as a seller, in all those three experiences. So that is what I'd like to leave you with today. And again, I'm really excited that you're doing this, because when we change the way that we sell, we will ultimately change the way that we all do business. And again, the intention is for you to become aware of what your obstacles are. And on the next video, we'll be talking about what do we do with this information that we came up with. And I'd love for you to put here comments on the blog or on the video, if you're watching this on YouTube, of what you came up with. What happened to you? What did you uncover of what you experienced as a seller and as a buyer? And from there, we'll be able to take those examples and really dig a little deeper, and then begin to remove these obstacles. So I'm excited for the next set of videos, and I look forward to connecting with you. And again, this is Asha with Birth of Your Life.